Good morning, and welcome to the fifth hearing of the White House's Religious Liberty Commission. My name is Ashley Bunduk, and I am the designated federal official for today's proceedings. I'm delighted to announce the official beginning of today's hearing and now turn it over to our Commission's Chairman, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick of Texas.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Meeting comes to order. We love to start on time, but we're a little late this morning, so forgive us. Rabbi Soloveitchik, you have the opening prayer for today. Would you bless us?
Please join me in prayer. Ribono shel olam, Almighty God, your servant David sang in his Psalms, Hine ma tov u'ma na'im, shevet achim gam yachad. Behold, how pleasant and goodly it is when brethren dwell together in unity. We thank you, O God, for the privilege of gathering together, representing faith, difference in unity, thanking you for America and for the blessing of religious freedom that it has bestowed upon all of us. We thank you as well for the privilege and the obligation of gathering together, charged by the President of the United States to protect faith and to protect the vulnerable and the minority religious communities in our society. Help us as brethren to be successful in this quest, so that the words with which David concluded his psalm in Jerusalem so many years ago will be applied to us as well. Kisham tziva Hashem et habracha, chayim ad olam. For there God has placed his blessing, a source of life everlasting. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We have been blessed with great speakers throughout our hearings, and once again today we have a person of great faith, a friend of mine for, I guess now 20 years. He served in the Texas House. He's now our Secretary of HUD, a person that we all look up to, who has been guided by God and has lived in a country that allows him to express his religious beliefs. And that's what this committee is about, representing all faiths. We have two more hearings scheduled, one in March and one in April, before presenting a report to the President of the United States is under our charter. And our focus on this committee, for those of you joining us for the first time, is clearly on individual liberty. In the last several years, many people of all faiths in this country have had their liberty denied, and we've had powerful testimony, at times bringing tears to our eyes. And today we will have another committee. We will continue as our schedule without a lunch break all the way till this afternoon. And before we begin with our first witness, it's my honor to bring out the Secretary of HUD, my friend, you might call him Reverend sometimes, Scott Turner. Scott?
Well, good morning. Thank you, Governor Patrick, Dr. Carson, and commissioners. It's so great to be with all of you here this morning. You know, freedom of religion is enshrined in the First Amendment as America's first freedom. It is not an afterthought, but it was a declaration of priority. It's the foundation on which all other freedoms depend on. And Governor Patrick, you spoke of this in your remarks in Davos. The liberty to worship God is grounded in our freedom to assemble. As a deeply personal and inherent right, a government that tramples such vital rights will treat nothing as sacred. President Ronald Reagan once declared, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We have witnessed firsthand the onslaught of what just 4 years of the Biden regime could accomplish. And the enemies of faith have no intent to stop with their systematic dismantling of our Constitution and the freedom of our forefathers that they fought for. That's why President Trump has made the protection of America's foundational freedom a clear and unapologetic priority, and I thank him. Today marks exactly 1 year and 3 days that the president signed the Eradicate an Anti-Christian Bias executive order, which reverses the Biden administration's hostility towards believers. No longer will we turn a blind eye. At HUD, our Center of Faith has been integral to carrying out this executive order. To eradicate literally means to pull up by the roots. Eradicate means to pull up by the roots, and that's exactly what we've done in anti-Christian bias at HUD. Through this work, we've invited faith-based organizations back to the table. Many years, faith-based organizations were not allowed to come to the table. After the Biden administration shut them out for many years, they were stiff-armed, but no longer. We'll welcome them back to the table. I have personally witnessed and seen our faith-based groups and organizations care for our homeless neighbors around the country. I've seen them help Americans recover from addiction. I've seen them provide food and shelter to the most vulnerable people in our country. The Trump administration is restoring the founders' intent to permit the free exercise of faith. The free exercise of faith. The growing threat across America is the intimidation and the threatening of those who seek to assemble freely, to live freely. And that's exactly what is being done in targeting of our Jewish neighbors and the Jewish faith. The October 7th massacre in Israel, it was a wake-up call, not only for our Jewish brothers and sisters, but for all people around the world, that hate is still alive and well. The shooting in Bondi Beach, Australia, was a reminder that if we leave this hatred unchecked, the next anti-Semitic massacre could very well take place in our homeland. We will no longer leave it unchecked. Accountability is on the rise. A recent report found that more than 3 in 4 American Jews felt less safe in our country following October the 7th. And almost half of Jewish college students feel threatened on their campus, or they feel pressured to hide their Jewish identity to avoid harassment. Jewish students, all students, should feel safe and secure on college campuses. Hate is learned, and college campuses across the country are fomenting it. It's an incubator. They're instigating the spirit of hate. We've all watched the anti-Semitic rioters turn American campuses into battlefields, viciously attacking Jewish students, vandalizing historic monuments and buildings, invading classes, ruining graduation ceremonies, and harassing innocent students who just want to go about their day. No longer will we turn a blind eye to these activities. President Trump acted swiftly upon his return to the White House to combat this wave of anti-Semitism. He signed an executive order to restore order and make clear that the glorification of terrorists and brutality against Jewish Americans will no longer be tolerated. The Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism, which the DOJ has played a central part, has been crucial in fighting this battle, and I want to thank everyone who is part of this fight. It's a battle that President Trump will continue to wage for Jewish Americans, for Christians, and for all Americans of all faith whose First Amendment freedoms are under attack. You know, it's fitting that we're here at the Museum of the Bible. The Word of God is powerful. Amen? Amen. And it's a powerful reminder of the importance of the First Amendment. For centuries, believers have been imprisoned, persecuted, and killed for simply reading the Bible or sharing God's Word. Friends, let us never take for granted the freedom that we enjoy in our beautiful country. Let us never take that for granted. Look where we are. We're in Washington, D.C., at the Museum of the Bible, freely assembled together. Let us never take these freedoms for granted. I'm grateful to the President and to this entire administration who embrace this responsibility and are committed to protecting Americans' freedom of religion. God bless you. Thank you for your time, and I'm praying for you daily. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I told you he had a little bit of preaching in him. Before we bring out our first witness, and I believe we're going to make a change out from the podium to the tables, so I can put in the record here, because this record will be memorialized, our great leader, Mary Margaret Bush, who has been our right-hand person running our committee and doing so much work, had a baby last week. And little baby Grace, Sienna Grace Bush. So, Mary, I know that you're watching, and so we wish you well. We look forward to having you come back after you get some sleep, because you're not going to get much sleep from here on out. Little Sienna Grace Bush. If our witnesses will come out for the first panel, Itzi Frankel, Shavos Kestefamabam, Coach Bruce Pearl from Auburn University, great basketball team, and Rabbi Uri Berman. Good morning, gentlemen. Itzi, you are first up to give your testimony. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Patrick, Dr. Carson, members of the White House Religious Liberty Commission, for inviting me to speak today. My name is Yitzi Frankel. I'm a father of 4 adorable children, 8 and under, a recent graduate of UCLA Law School, and, unfortunately, a first-hand witness to the erosion of religious freedom on American college campuses. As an Orthodox Jew and descendant of Holocaust survivors, my faith isn't just a part of my life. It's the core of who I am. I wear a kippah, keep kosher, observe Shabbos, and pray daily. These practices sustained me through law school, and it is my faith that made me a target when anti-Semitism surged at UCLA after October 7th, 2023. In the wake of Hamas's brutal attacks, UCLA's campus became a breeding ground for hatred. Activists chanted genocidal slogans like "From the River to the Sea" and "Intifada Revolution." Jews at UCLA witnessed classmates smashing a piñata of Prime Minister Netanyahu while yelling, "Beat that effing Jew." But the worst came in spring 2024, when activists set up an encampment on Royce Quad, the heart of campus, and created a Jew exclusion zone. Masked enforcers set up checkpoints, barricades, and required wristbands for entry. Jewish students like me were stopped, harassed, and physically blocked unless we disavowed Israel's right to exist and hid our religious symbols like our Star of David necklaces and our kippahs. To illustrate how chilling this was, I brought something with me today. This is a copy of my grandfather's Nazi-issued work permit, complete with a swastika. This was the only paper that allowed my grandfather to pass safely. It has a non-Jewish identification, My grandfather, Solomon Frankel, had to hide his Jewish identity and go by a non-Jewish name, Ivan Bondrovsky. It is the greatest pride of my life and a rebuke to Hitler and the Nazis that 80 years after the Holocaust, I had the honor to name my son after my grandfather. He now proudly carries the name Solomon Frankel. These same 80 years later, on an American college campus, I was shocked that I was expected to wear an activist-approved wristband and disavow my Jewish faith, just to access public spaces. This is not the first time someone in my family has needed the correct identification to pass safely. We must ensure it is the last. 80 years after the Holocaust, many of my Jewish classmates lived in fear on an American college campus. The way I was treated as a Jew on UCLA's campus violated my rights to freely exercise my religion in public, turning UCLA into a place of contempt rather than learning. This wasn't just mob rule. This was enabled by institutional failure. UCLA's administration didn't just stand by. They actively aided the exclusion. It was UCLA itself that provided the barricades used to create the Jew exclusion zone. They stationed security to enforce checkpoints, and despite their public admissions that they knew Jews were being blocked, they instructed campus police to stand down, ceding public property to violent anti-Semites. Even UCLA's own task force to combat anti-Semitism condemned all of this as structural anti-Semitism and a violation of the First Amendment. The Justice Department agreed, finding in 2025 that UCLA acted with deliberate indifference, creating a hostile environment under the Equal Protection Clause and Title VI. My experience mirrors a national crisis. Similar discrimination and harassment happened at Columbia, Harvard, Northwestern, and beyond, where anti-Semitism masquerades as political protest but targets religious identity. Post-October 7th, Jewish students nationwide have faced isolation, threats, and chilled expression of faith. Wearing a kippah or attending a Shabbos service has become a risk. That's why, with the help of brilliant attorneys at the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, Clement and Murphy, and Davis Polk, I sued UCLA alongside 2 other students and a professor. We brought numerous claims, including under the First Amendment Free Exercise Clause and the KKK Act. We argued that UCLA illegally excluded Jews from their own campus by kowtowing to the activists and their anti-Semitic acts. In August 2024, Judge Mark Scarzi issued an injunction. He faulted UCLA for continuing to open its campus to other students, even as the university well knew that Jews like myself were being illegally blocked. He rightly called their mistreatment of Jews on UCLA's campus unimaginable and abhorrent. Unbelievably, UCLA initially appealed this ruling. They eventually dropped their appeal, and still they fought for a year and finally surrendered in July 2025. The settlement included a federal court order barring exclusion of Jewish students and faculty, plus $6.13 million, symbolizing the 613 commandments in the Torah. That sum included donations to worthy Jewish organizations like Chabad at UCLA, the Jewish Graduate Organization, and the Orthodox Union Jewish Learning Initiative on campus. This outcome wasn't just a personal victory. It exposed lessons for the nation. Litigation can hold failing institutions accountable, but it cannot be the only tool. UCLA's penalties, including frozen grants and proposed fines, show that accountability matters. Yet some critics, even from Jewish organizations, call these punitive. I disagree. Without consequences, universities will continue facilitating anti-Semitic hate. My case proves that swift enforcement protects religious liberty, but gaps remain. Looking forward, I urge this commission to recommend policies that safeguard religious minorities like Jewish students. The administration must strengthen Title VI enforcement by the DOJ and Department of Education, mandate investigations within set timelines, and tie federal funding to compliance. I'll close with this. Several days after October 7th, when UCLA's chancellor issued a weak statement that failed to unequivocally support Jewish students or condemn the celebrations of Jewish death sweeping campuses, I wrote to him directly. I quoted the book of Esther. In it, Mordecai gives Queen Esther a dire warning. Do not imagine that you, of all Jews, will escape. If you keep silent in this crisis, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another quarter. And who knows, perhaps you have attained this royal position for just such a crisis. Leadership hesitated then, as it has too often since, but in 3 weeks we will celebrate Purim, the story of how silence nearly doomed a people, yet courage and providence brought deliverance. I take Mordecai's words to heart. This is why I stood up to UCLA and am not afraid to call them and others out. This commission and the policies it recommends can be our modern Mordecai and Esther, a call to action before it's too late. Let us ensure that no Jewish student or any believer must ever again hide their faith to access education, public spaces, or safety in America. Relief and deliverance must come from here, now, through bold protection of religious liberty for all. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Members, as we have done before, we will wait till all four testify, and then we will take questions. Shabbos Kestenbaum, is that right?
Close enough.
All right, close enough. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
For sure. Well, let me start off firstly by saying that in Jewish theology, when we wake up, we say a prayer that is called Modeh Ani, which is literally translated as thankful am I. And the rabbinic commentators are always puzzled by that phraseology, because it should not be Modeh Ani, thankful am I, but Ani Modeh, I am thankful. And the lesson we learn is before we can say anything, before we go about our day, the very first thing is we must show appreciation. So before I even get to the testimony, I just want to say what a remarkable breath of fresh air this commission and this hearing is. As a individual who registered to vote as a Democrat the day I turned 18, nobody's perfect, we could not get help from the Biden-Harris administration. They did not lift a finger as American students were being denied access to education on their college campuses. And I remember on the campaign trail when President Trump said that religious liberties would be a priority when he gets into office. And this is a testament to the fact that the promises made on the campaign trail have in fact become promises kept. All of you on this commission are a testament to that. Many of the individuals in this room, like Martin Marks, like Jennifer Korn, like Leo Terrell, like Harmeet Dillon, like Dr. Sebastian Gorka, you have been fighting the fight that I wish the previous administration would have cared to fight as well. So first and foremost, thank you for doing this. The second point I want to say is that in 1790, President George Washington writes a letter to the largest Jewish community in the United States, numbering 25 families in Newport, Rhode Island. And he says, here in the United States, we want you, as descendants of Abraham, to come to our country and practice your faith, because in his own words, quote, bigotry will be granted no sanction and persecution no assistance. And how shocked and how embarrassed and how appalled would President Washington and President Adams and President Jefferson and our founding fathers be today to know that in the 21st century, American students and American citizens were denied access to education because of their religious identity, and the people denying them that access were those who were allegedly in the upper echelons of our society, the most elite, the most progressive, the most well-educated. Why do we care about Harvard and UCLA and Columbia and Penn and all these other morally bankrupt institutions? It's because these are institutions that purport to train the next generation of American leaders. And by and large, they're not wrong. Statistically speaking, it's not an exaggeration at all to state I probably sat in a room at Harvard with a future congressman, a future senator, even a future president of the United States. And if these are America's future policymakers, if these are America's future judges and jurors, if these are America's future authors of the books your kids and grandkids will read, who are taught to hate Western civilization, to hate the founding of our country, and to hate other people based on their religious identity, then this is no longer simply a Jewy issue or an anti-Semitism issue, but this is an issue that cuts at the core of our American democracy, our liberal values, and our Western civilization. And I have to say, even though, of course, this hearing is focused on anti-Semitism, and I will get to that, I promise, I started a timer, but I do want to say that when chants at Oklahoma State of F the Mormons are being sprung out, that is an attack against the Jewish community. It's obviously an attack against the Mormon community, but it's also an attack on every single American. When we have in Long Beach, California, California just a week ago, a Catholic school being vandalized to the point whereby they can't even renovate the school anymore. That is not merely an attack on the Catholic community, but it's an attack on the Jewish community, and it's an attack on every single American. And that, unfortunately, brings me to Harvard University. I will, in the interest of time, skip to October 7th, which was not only the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, but it was also a massacre in which 45 American citizens were butchered by the rapist Islamic regime of Hamas. And I just want to quote what was happening on the night of October 7th amongst the most educated, the most elite, and the most progressive of our society. Quote, 2 days after Hamas's deadly attack on Israel last year, senior administrators at Harvard University wrestled with how to respond. Drafting a public statement, they edited out the word violent to describe the attack when a dean complained that it, quote, sounded like assigning blame. They debated whether to explicitly disown a declaration by some Harvard student groups that Israel was responsible for the violence, but ultimately they decided not to. And when they did eventually come out with their statement, it did not, in fact, include the word violent. The largest demonstration I saw at Harvard University was a few days after October 7th, where a masked student gets up in front of 1,000 students and professors, and he says Hamas, which is the only time Hamas was mentioned, is not a terrorist group. We will look upon them as freedom fighters. Who are we to condemn the resistance? And note the immediate reaction is of the 1,000 students and professors, thunderous applause, not one thing to challenge, to condemn, to walk out of that statement. It is no coincidence, therefore, that 2 weeks after that statement, a Jewish Israeli student was physically assaulted on Harvard Business School. You can watch the footage. It's free on YouTube. The assailants of that attack, one of them was awarded a $65,000 fellowship by Harvard Law School to intern at the Council on American Islamic Relations, which has noted ties to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. And the other assailant was given the honor of being class marshal at Harvard's graduation. It's no coincidence that 3 weeks after that, an Israeli student at Harvard was told by her professor to leave the classroom because her nationality made other students uncomfortable. It's no coincidence that a month after that, a Jewish American citizen at Harvard was spat on for wearing a yarmulke. It is no coincidence that 3 weeks after that, a Harvard employee vandalized all of our hostage posters, writing on Kfir Bibas, a 9-month-old baby who was kidnapped, quote, his head is still on, where is the evidence? Who then wrote on Noah Argamani, another kidnapped Jewish victim, that Jews are best friends with Jeffrey Epstein, who then challenged me to debate him in a secluded underpass as to whether Jews orchestrated 9/11, and then posted a video of him waving a machete with a picture of my face, saying he wants to fight, he's coming after more than blood, and he's coming after the Zionist mafia. And perhaps the icing on the cake is of the dozens of phone calls and emails we sent to Harvard University simply inquiring about his employment status. To this day, they have not once responded to us. It is inconceivable that any other minority group would be treated with the disdain, the disregard, and the contempt that Harvard has historically, routinely, and consistently treated its Jewish student population. But to me, I can forgive and forget. There is one thing I will not forgive and I will not forget, and that was the encampments. Forget about the fact that the students chanted for a globalized intifada at all hours of the day. Forget about the fact that they violated all time, place, and manner restrictions. Forget about the fact that some American Jewish students were actually living on Airbnbs off campus because they didn't want to be confronted each day. Every single time I went to class, I cut through my own campus. Every time I did that, masked students who decided to name themselves safety marshals, when they would see me and other visibly Jewish students approaching, they would take out their phones and they would start following us on our way to class, and they would start recording us. And we would ask them to stop, but they would never respond. And we told the president of the university and the president of the United States, but again, his mental acuity was questionable at the time. We told him that American students were being followed on their way to class as a result of their religious identity. And not only did the president of the university, Alan Garber, who is still the president of the university today, not only did he never respond to our concerns, he actually told the encampment leaders, if you agree to pack up your tents, we will allow you to meet with the Harvard Management Corporation, which oversees Harvard's $59 billion endowment, to discuss divestment from Israel. If you agree to pack up your tents, we will allow you to meet with senior Harvard faculty to discuss the establishment of a Palestinian Studies Center. And of the hundreds of students who took part in the encampments, who violated internal Harvard policy and followed American students on their way to class, 0 were expelled, 0 were suspended, or 0 were disciplined in any measurable way. The message that Alan Garber told American students was, if you call for an intifada loud enough, and if you follow American Jewish students long enough, and if you vandalize enough private property, at one point, the encampment students at Harvard University tried using bolt cutters to try to break open the locks on Harvard's gates. Says President Alan Garber, if you do all of those things, we will grant you a seat at the table, which is why we filed a civil rights lawsuit against the university. We are the first lawsuit of its kind pertaining to the civil rights violations of Jewish students on a college campus to be allowed to go to trial. I'm very proud of the fact that there are currently 7 lawsuits brought by Jewish students across this country that have cited Kestenbaum v. Harvard as legal precedent. And as it pertains to recommendations, because I know I'm out of time, any institution of higher learning that violates the civil rights of any group based on gender, based on religion, based on ethnicity, it does not entitle itself to American taxpayer funding. If you truly want to help, and I know all of you do, especially our president, you would continue to do what you currently are doing, which is ensuring that Harvard University does not receive a penny of American taxpayer money in perpetuity, ever again. You would ensure that any institution that violates the rights of Christians or Jews, any religious group, does not afford themselves the right to American taxpayer money. It is that simple. We would ensure that students who come to this country who are not American citizens, who do not believe in the values of the West, who, like Mahmoud Khalil, call for the eradication of Western civilization, are not allowed within 50 feet of this country. They are not Americans. They do not stand by American ideals, and we have no obligation to bring them into our country. And I will end by how I opened, which is an attack on one Christian is an attack on one Jew, and an attack on one Jew is an attack on one Christian. We are in this together. And post Charlie Kirk, who is a remarkable role model, not just for me, but for millions of young men and women across this country, there has been a dearth of role models, of people who tell young people the value, the importance, the meaningfulness of having religion in their lives. And I would encourage as well that this commission seriously look into the ways that we can encourage Gen Z, men in particular, to be better as it pertains to their religious affiliation. America was founded predominantly by Christians, by a shared Hebraic tradition and Judeo-Christian values, and I know, as an Orthodox Jew, America would be a much stronger and better country if more young Christian men went to church, if more young Christian men studied and learned the New Testament and the Old Testament, and if young Christian men believed and learned the values of and teachings of Jesus. So I want to thank all of you for doing what the previous administration did not do and recognizing the fundamental importance of religious liberties in our country.
Thank you. Our next witness, Coach Bruce Pearl from Auburn, and I must confess, my brother and sister-in-law live in Auburn, and they're big fans and never miss a game. And you finally convinced them to watch a committee on religious liberty, so thank you. You are the founder of the Jewish Coaches Association. Coach, you're up.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak today, and thank you all very much for your work. What in the world did you think a college basketball coach could do here today? Can you? It doesn't feel like you necessarily belong here, but I'm honored to be here. I've been outspoken about the dangers of the rise of anti-Semitism as a dad, as a former college coach, and as a current basketball analyst for Turner and CBS Sports. I grew up as an athlete. I grew up Jewish and in Boston. I was a minority, and early on, I recognized that there were obstacles, but I did not look at them as roadblocks, and as a result, I have lived the American dream. Since October 7th, it has become increasingly clear that we're facing a real moment of danger, not only for the Jewish people, but for the principles of religious freedom and human dignity that are central to this great country. I have spent decades building and leading teams made up of people from every background, race, ethnicity, and religion. I know firsthand that when people judge each other by anything other than the content of their character, their work ethic, and what they contribute, then the entire team suffers. That truth extends beyond sports. History teaches us that when a society begins to scapegoat, exclude, or target a group based on their identity, the decay really stops with that group. Unfortunately, we're seeing those warning signs right here in the United States of America. The poison is coming from across the political spectrum. On the far right, we see conspiracy theories about Jewish power and hidden Israel influence. We see Holocaust denial and efforts to demonize Jews as enemies of Christianity. On the far left, the Jewish people's basic rights and sense of belonging are being attacked under the guise of anti-Zionism. From Islamist extremists, including terrorist groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and their sponsor, the Iranian regime, we face openly genocidal threats. This Muslim Brotherhood literally wants me dead as I sit here and speak to you today. Why? Because I am Jewish, or I support the state of Israel, or I am a Zionist. While many different aspects of the Jewish religion, the ethnic identity are being attacked, it's important, it's vital to recognize the specific role that Israel and Zionism plays in our faith. According to Pew, the vast majority of Jews believe that caring about Israel is essential, an important part of what it means to be Jewish. Similarly, polls show that the vast majority of Jewish people consider denying Israel's right to exist and chants from the river to the sea to be anti-Semitic. This has nothing to do with criticizing the Israeli government, which Israelis and Jews do all the time. It reflects the fact that Zionism is central to Jewish religious ethnic identity and is rooted in thousands of years of history, language, culture, faith, geography. Jewish prayer, scripture, and ritual are filled with references to Zion. Jews have prayed towards Jerusalem for millennia. Our holidays end with the words, "Next year in Jerusalem." Half of the world's Jews live in Israel today, creating an unbroken connection between the Jewish people and our ancestral homeland, Israel. Bad faith actors will twist these facts and use them to claim that Jews are disloyal to this country. But the truth is, we're like countless other groups that have immigrated here. We're proud of our unique heritage, and we're also proud Americans who have helped make our country great. As I said, I grew up in Boston, a town with great ethnic neighborhoods, which sometimes led to a lack of integration, which sometimes led to some mistrust and tension. But the Italians of the North End, the Irish of South Boston, the African Americans of Roxbury, or the Jews of Dorchester, Mattapan weren't any less American because they love their ethnic backgrounds or their culture or their history. Because many people don't fully understand who Jews are, they also can't recognize a lot of the bigotry we experience today. So let's be clear. When someone dehumanizes Israelis or promotes discrimination against the world's only Jewish state or denies its right to exist, those are not simply controversial political opinions. They are forms of hate that have real-world consequences right here in America for me and for my family. Much of the hostility spreads in ways that are not easy to see, and in too many university classrooms, the notion that Israel is a settler colonial state is a taken, it's given, even though it's a lie that erases 3,000 years of Jewish history and connection to the Jewish homeland. Some students are so poisoned by such lies that they vandalize property or tear down posters with faces of Israeli children and mothers and hostages being held in Gaza. Organizations such as Students for the Justice of Palestine or CARE try hard to intimidate Jewish peers on their campuses. Just last month, a young athlete burned down the historic Beth Israel Synagogue in Mississippi and later told police that it was the synagogue of Satan. That phrase has recently become popular again because far-right podcasters are spreading it to millions of people online, seeking to turn our Christian brothers against their Jewish neighbors. This return to religious intolerance builds on years of some Americans just blaming the Jews for every problem in their lives. Replacement theology takes the Old Testament and Jesus' life on this earth as a Jew out, and it replaces it with the church only, with America only, and with white only. This can be a powerful attraction to many young white Christians experience a delay in trying to live the American dream. The end result of all the disinformation and radicalization is deadly violence. Last year, a far-left terrorist murdered a young couple, Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, outside the Capitol Jewish Museum, just a few blocks away. I was in D.C. that morning speaking to members of Congress in the Capitol. We were celebrating Jewish Heritage Month with the Combating Anti-Semitism movement. That could have easily been me. And with the entire life in front of Yaron and Sarah, if given the option, I wish it was me. I will leave here today with my head on a swivel. I recognize that I'm a target. You think I'm exaggerating? In Boulder, Colorado, an Islamist terrorist hurled Molotov cocktails at participants who were part of a weekly solidarity walk, just calling for the release of hostages, many of them Americans. The terrorists ended up murdering 82-year-old Karen Diamond, a Holocaust survivor who came to this country for a better life and was murdered by the same hate that fueled Nazi Germany. In 2018 and 19, white supremacist terrorists targeted synagogues in Pittsburgh and Poway, murdering 12 Jewish worshipers. This is not who we are, but it is who we will become if we don't take dramatic and urgent actions to fight anti-Semitism now. This commission and our federal government and American Jewry have an essential role to play in that fight right here and right now. First, civil rights laws must be fully enforced and applied consistently and even-handedly for the protection of all groups, including Jewish Americans. Second, institutions, including our own Congress, should be encouraged to adopt and use a clear, widely accepted working definition of anti-Semitism, the IHRA definition of a non-binding tool. The clarity of this definition helps protect the civil rights while fully respecting First Amendment freedoms. And third, Jews in America must do more than report anti-Semitic incidents. The Jewish community is wrong in assuming that anti-Semitism comes from ignorance, and that if we document it and shame it loudly enough, it'll just stop. American Jewry needs to build a stronger Jewish identity and stop apologizing for it. Our success is an example of the American dream. Our thriving, our educating, our contributing has and will continue to make America great. We need Jews to participate in Jewish life, to support day schools and camps, synagogues and temples, visit Israel and support the state of Israel and stop apologizing for it. Reporting on anti-Semitism is not the same thing as fighting anti-Semitism. And we do need our institutions to impose consequences on those who enable or excuse hatred. And finally, education is crucial. Academic and civil institutions must teach what anti-Semitism looks like today in all its contemporary forms. Universities want to be institutionally neutral. They don't want to take sides for fear of protests or stirring the pot. Look, we first teach the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, truth and lies and propaganda. The truth is that Israel has been surrounded by Islamic neighbors who rule their people and who simply don't want to live next door or side by side. They want the Jews gone from the land. That's the truth. The truth is that if the Jews had lost any of the wars that we were thrust into, 48, 67, 73, or October 7, 2023, Jerusalem would not be the free city that it is today. That would protect all faiths from visiting there, live and worship. Yet somehow we are afraid to teach our kids those truths on our college campuses today. I love the United States of America. This country saved my family from the Holocaust and from pogroms. Jewish Americans should be our greatest patriots, should be the most grateful citizens in this country. Because of its promise of liberty, my family was able to build a life here. But we all know that freedom must be protective. It does not preserve itself. And today that responsibility is more urgent than ever. The Jewish people are running out of places to live. Where else are we supposed to go? Some say go back to Israel. And some say that Israel is not ours to go back to. So do you see the problem? We have a choice. We can hope that this moment passes, or we can stand up and say clearly, this is not who we are. In 2025, the Auburn basketball team won the SEC championship. We got to our second Final Four. And publicly and proudly, we call God, and we thank God for the blessing. Last year, there were 3 Jewish coaches that participated in the Final Four. 3 out of 4 teams. Don't tell me this isn't the greatest country in the world. And this is an opportunity for everybody. Thank you for allowing me to participate today. And thank you for your commitment to defending religious freedom for all Americans. God bless America. And I'm Israel Khan.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you, Bruce. Rabbi Ari Berman, you're our next witness.
Thank you so much, Chairman Patrick, and thank you for the invitation to be here. The next time we speak, perhaps do not put me after Coach Pearl. This has really been a great honor to be here with you, to be with Dr. Carson, my dear friend, Rabbi Soloveitchik, Reverend Graham, who I last was with in Washington at the President's inauguration, Dr. Phil, everyone here in this commission, and these incredible witnesses. It's so important that we're here today because the issue of anti-Semitism in higher education is not simply a Jewish concern, it's an urgent national one. Because anti-Semitism is not the fundamental problem. It's a symptom of a disease. The disease is the moral erosion and cultural amnesia afflicting some of our most historic institutions of higher education. I am the president of Yeshiva University, our nation's premier Jewish university. And what I will share with you today is from the perspective of a university president. For after October 7th, I was in communication with presidents from across the country. And what I saw was profoundly disappointing and in some cases inspiring. And I think you need to hear both to best diagnose and treat this disease. On October 7th itself, I was in Jerusalem and witnessed firsthand what it means to be attacked by a terrorist army. The missiles in the air, the sirens urging us into the safe rooms. The day that I sent my son, a senior in college and combat reservist in the IDF, off to war. While my son risked his life defending the Jewish state, I was across the Atlantic working to defend the United States. When I returned to America a few days later, I was horrified by the weak response of many of my colleagues to this assault on innocent civilians. I drafted a statement condemning the rape, beheading of children, and taking of hostages, affirming our support for Israel, for the Palestinian people who suffer under the cruel rule of Hamas, and with all people of moral conscience. And then I devoted the following weeks to enlisting support from other universities to create a coalition of universities united against terrorism. From these calls, two conclusions became clear. First, we have partners in this fight, and we need to rally the angels. One of the first calls that I made was to Rochelle Ford, president of Dillard University, a historically black college and university. She said, Ari, the Jewish people prevail when Moses holds his hands up, referencing the biblical story. But who holds Moses' hands? It is Aaron and Hur. Let us be your Aaron and Hur. You can lean on us. My next call was to Shirley Hoekstra, president of the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities. And her office said to me, Ari, I will sign whatever you write. You don't even need to show it to me. We stand with you. One by one, presidents for major public and private universities, HBCUs, and faith-based universities joined us. More than 100 universities signed on, culminating in a full-page Wall Street Journal ad that declared that moral clarity actually can exist in higher education in America. That was my first conclusion, that we need to rally the angels. But secondly, I saw the depth of the crisis. Many presidents privately acknowledged Hamas as the villain, but they were too afraid of campus backlash to speak publicly. Fear had replaced leadership. Now, it was no coincidence that institutions unable to speak with moral clarity after October 7th often stood by while Jewish students' rights like Shabbos and Yitzi were violated, because that same loss of purpose was at work. And this is the crux of the story. Historically, admissions to a university meant entry into an intergenerational moral and intellectual community. Students did not attend college to merely acquire credentials. They joined a conversation of core texts and values stretching from antiquity into the future. In the late 20th century, however, universities embraced a moral and cultural relativism, abandoning their roles as custodians of inherited wisdom. Liberal arts fractured into narrow specializations. Students graduated without a shared foundation, without the tools to distinguish truth from falsehood, justice from cruelty, or courage from convenience. Into this vacuum stepped ideological extremism, dividing the world not by values, but by power. The oppressor and oppressed, the colonizer and colonized. Vast sums of unreported foreign money fueled its spread. Dissent was punished through cancel culture. And Jews, among history's most persecuted people, were startlingly cast as oppressors, while Hamas, among the world's most brutal terrorists, were perversely recast as the oppressed. Most students on college campuses know little about Israel or Jewish history. They follow cues from peers, professors, and institutions that reward conformity rather than understanding. Now, this context matters for the Commission's work, for this is not only a battle for Jewish students' safety, it's a battle for the future of the soul of our nation. America is called to greatness, to be a beacon of light and a mover of history. And what makes America great is our foundational story of freedom and our foundational biblical values: moral responsibility, civic virtue, human dignity, and the pursuit of truth. If we fail to propagate these values in education, we fail all of our children. To be clear, I'm not calling for a return to some imagined golden age. Ours is a nation conceived and promised not perfection, but that promise advances only when we stand on the values that made it possible and carry them forward with clarity and courage. For since the failure is cultural amnesia, the solution is not censorship, but memory, recovering the values we hold dear. And here's the good news. Across the country, students are signaling that they want grounding, context, and moral seriousness. This helps explain one of the most significant and under-discussed developments in American higher education: the rise of faith-based colleges and universities, FBCUs, which now educate roughly 10% of undergraduates and consistently outpace national enrollment growth. My own university, Yeshiva University, has recently doubled in size, and my colleagues report similar skyrocketing growth. In the moral and intellectual vacuums left by many elite institutions, these universities demonstrate that rigorous scholarship and moral formation are mutually reinforcing. Their growth reflects a renewed hunger for education that connects intellect to meaning and pairs progress with purpose. And this is our moment of opportunity. As I mentioned during my benediction at the President's inauguration, Americans are searching for meaning. We need to rise to meet this moment. We need to build a coalition of angels. In addition to governing the universities that are failing to protect their Jewish students' civil liberties, we must also gather and strengthen those that successfully transmit America's story and American values. A government initiative to fund faith-based colleges and universities, especially for research engaging questions of faith, would be one way to support this effort. In summary, anti-Semitism on campus will not be defeated by defensive policies alone. It will be defeated when universities understand themselves as moral actors, shaping judgment, character, and civic conscience. When institutions recover the courage to speak clearly about right and wrong, truth and falsehood, dignity and hatred, then Jewish students and all students will flourish. Outside my office door hangs a letter from Thomas Jefferson to Mordecai Noah addressing anti-Semitism. Jefferson wrote that our laws have applied the only antidote to this vice, protecting our religious as they do our civil rights by putting all on an equal footing. And then he added 6 words that summon us today. But more remains to be done. That unfinished work is now ours. To ensure universities renew America's moral inheritance, to see that freedom is not emptied of meaning nor equality stripped of conscience, to fulfill America's promise, not only by laws, but by the values we teach, the courage we model, and the future we choose to form.
Thank you, Rabbi. Members, we'll open up for questions. Kelly, your light's on.
First, thank you for your testimony. It was really powerful, every one of you. And, you know, I just hate what you had to describe. It should not be happening in our country. And I'm amazed because I've been doing religious liberty work for 37 years. And I saw this start to get worse. We have synagogue cases all over the country. They just want to build a synagogue. They just want to have their synagogue. And the attacks are just unbelievable. But I've seen more. It started before October 7th. So this was building before that as well. But I just want to thank you for coming and giving testimony. And Coach Pearl, I also want to say something. There was an incident at Auburn. There was a large, at night, after work hours, a large event at one of the auditoriums led by the students, and a few of the coaches were attacked. Coach Freeze and Coach Pearl by the Freedom from Religion Foundation, saying that they shouldn't allow that. It's like, people can go to whatever religious service they want to at night, but I just want to thank you because when you first called me, when Coach Freeze first called me for legal help and making sure there was no problem, the first thing you both said is, I'm not going to back down from my faith, no matter what I'm told, no matter what the consequences. And I thank you for that stance. That's what we need to keep religious freedom. And I want to thank you for your example, your leadership, and standing for religion. I think that was a big Christian gathering, and you stood with all those people in that gathering. And then the last thing I'll say, just if anybody has any ideas, I've been trying to write down any recommendations, and I know there's a mention of enforcing civil rights. If there's any new particular policy law that is not already covered that you have to mind, let us know about that. Anybody on the panel as well. Thank you.
Bruce Pearl.
It was an honor to have my foundation and my family help sponsor about 9,000 kids worship in an auditorium, hear testimony and witness, and about 250 of them jumped in the water and got baptized that night. I got criticized from some in the Jewish community for proselytizing. I'm a basketball coach. Most of my kids are Christian. I've got a few Jewish kids on my team, but I have always had a team pastor, and I want my kids to get closer to the Lord. There is a revival going on in this country, and I think it's actually going to save our country, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But my message, and so it was amazing. That event's called Unite, and Tanya and Chad Pruitt have taken that event all throughout the country, and it's wonderful. This may be uncomfortable to hear, but again, my job is to bring people together, players together from different types. Abraham is the father of all, for me, being in a Christian world, I'm always talking to my Christian friends. I'll say, so, who are you having over for Passover this year? And they'll say, Coach, we're not Jewish. I said, you're always telling me you want to be more like Jesus. All the time you want to be more like Jesus. Jesus celebrated Passover every year of his life, right? He held the door open for Elijah. Why aren't you celebrating Passover? And again, it's a way of obviously, connecting us. I tell people all the time, do you know the two most popular Jews in Alabama are? Me and Jesus. These things connect us. They connect us. I believe that we should embrace them. I think it just brings us closer together. And I do remind people that 12 Jewish men died horrific deaths bringing Christianity to the world. Those are facts. Read your Bible. Again, these are things that should unite us. And you're right, guys, we have allies. We have friends. But for such a time as this commission and this country has got work to do.
Can I quickly add to that policy?
Shabbos?
Yeah, so the answer is kind of yes and no as it pertains to policies that already exist and the new policies. So the laws on their books are actually pretty good. The problem was, especially with the last administration, they were just objectively never enforced. So when the Department of Education, the Department of Justice, the civil rights offices refuse to enforce the laws, then it's irrelevant how strong the laws are if they're not being enforced. So for example, President Eisenhower, after Brown v. Board of Education, told racist schools in the South, if you do not integrate your schools, we will cut off all federal funding to those schools. And interestingly enough, the segregationists use the argument that Harvard University is using now, which is that is going to affect innocent white students who did nothing wrong. And President Eisenhower's response was, that's too damn bad. Make sure you have black kids in your class on Monday. And lo and behold, that's exactly what they did, and they did not get a single penny in federal funds being cut. President Obama and then Vice President Joe Biden did the exact same thing with college campuses. They said in 2014 that 1 in 3 women would experience some form of sexual harassment on campuses. Therefore, they had a whole college tour, and they told these colleges, if you do not eradicate the systemic and pervasive nature of sexual harassment, we will cut off all federal funding. And lo and behold, all of the colleges reported plans to the federal government as to what they would do to combat sexual harassment. President Trump has done the exact same thing, but for whatever reason, he's wrong to do it now, even though there's strong precedent of American presidents doing that thing. The expenditure of federal dollars is also a manifestation of our values. We value religious liberties, we value religious freedoms, so much so that we are not going to fund institutions if they violate those things. So in terms of the policies on the books, I think a lot of them are pretty good. The things that can be improved is we have a great Secretary of Education. Hopefully she'll be the last Secretary of Education for the Department of Education. That's a conversation for another time. And under Section 117 of the Higher Education Act, she has produced and streamlined the amount of foreign funding coming in from foreign actors. The problem is we don't know what we don't know. So for example, Yale University was underreporting how much they were receiving from Qatar by $25 million alone. Qatar is the largest state sponsor of American institutions of higher learning. There should be a blanket ban on foreign adversaries funding our campuses. So for example, there are so many Chinese communists at Harvard University, and this is true, there's a Wall Street Journal on this, that the Chinese Communist Party literally refers to the Harvard Kennedy School, which is their School of Public Policy and Government, as, quote, the party school. Chinese communists or individuals who work against American interests should not be allowed on American campuses for any reason. They should not be allowed to donate money to American campuses for any reason. So that would be one example of new policies that we should be looking into. Why is it that the Chinese communists or Islamic nations know that the secret to undermine the United States is to sort of politically indoctrinate young people? We have to recognize that as well and get those who do not believe in American values off our campuses and out of our country as fast as possible.
Okay. I'll just quickly add, no one threatened me with a sword, and maybe we'll get fencing Shabbos lessons. But at the encampment, there was a student who came out of the encampment, stood behind Jews, including me, with the inverted red triangle, is on camera throwing punches at Zionists, has given interviews where she says it's cool to punch Zionists. UCLA says we can't discipline these students because they're masked. A real mask ban, an enforced mask ban, would clear up a lot of problems.
If I can just add one.
Yes, sir, Rabbi.
It's so important that when we talk about new policies, and it's important to do with the stick, but we also have to have the carrot. It's important to focus on everything that the universities should not be doing, but actually coming around with a coalition of universities that are transmitting American story and American values right matters. And I've said this to the Secretary of the Department of Education directly, even when it comes to international students. International students coming to universities aren't good or bad. It depends what universities they go to. If they go to universities that teach them to hate America, then that's bad. But when they go to universities that teach them to love America, that's actually good. And we have thousands of foreign students. I just had a group of South Korean students. They came to Yeshiva University. They wrote me a note. They said, "Dear President Berman, we love Yeshiva. We stand with Israel." Now, we never told them to stand with Israel. We told them to love America. And they know when you love America, you naturally will stand with Israel. And this is part of our education. And we need to gather, coalesce, and reward those universities that are actually transmitting the American story and American values. That is essential for policy, that this group, and this hasn't been done yet, that this group can uniquely recommend and further to help strengthen America.
Dealing with the question or the issue of finance, I can tell you as the president of the Senate in Texas, who oversees a $180 billion budget, if I want to get the presidents and the chancellors to Austin immediately on their jets, all I have to do is say, your funding is going to be cut. They respond to that more than anything else, whether it's federal or state funding. Ryan, you're up next, and then Rabbi.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all four of the witnesses. That was just very compelling testimony that I doubt I'll ever forget. And as I was listening, two thoughts went through my head. That's evil, but probably not illegal. And that's evil and probably illegal. In terms of what you were describing as what you experienced on campus. And then, of course, the stuff that was evil and illegal, you didn't have anybody, either campus leadership or in the Biden administration, that would actually enforce the law. And I guess my question, and it's for anyone who wants to answer it, how should we as a commission, and how should, ultimately we're offering advice to the Trump administration, how should we think about where that line is between evil but legal? Evil but legal versus evil but illegal. And the reason I ask the question is, you had helpfully said that an attack on Mormons is an attack on Jews, is an attack on Christians. Religious liberty needs to also extend to people whose theology we disagree with, including their theology about the Jews or their theology about Israel. We may disagree with that theology. The Religious Liberty Commission still has to defend their liberty to hold it. Likewise, what came to my mind when you described an attack on a Jew as an attack on a Christian, as an attack on a LDS. Also, the First Amendment hangs or falls together. Religious liberty and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And it's obvious to me that some of the stuff that went on at UCLA and Harvard is just clearly illegal. But other of the stuff, look, stupid people get to exercise their free speech rights too. But as you mentioned, there are time, place, and manner restrictions, there are fighting words, there's incitement to violence, there's harassment. Help us think through what's on what side of the line.
Okay, this is actually my favorite question. I really like talking about it. This is like Christmas morning for me. Okay, there are two ways. Sorry, Hanukkah morning for me. There are two ways.
Totally confused there for just a moment.
Sorry. Don't tell my rabbi I said that. There are two ways of answering the question. I want to first focus on Harvard University and then broadly apply that to the American legal system. So I find it really remarkable that the attacks on American Jews, myself and Yitzi in particular, have been that we're trying to silence free speech. I find that remarkable because on our college campuses, the only people who have ever silenced our classrooms, who've disrupted our learning, were those calling for an intifada. I cannot point to a single Jewish student on a single American campus who drew swastikas at the Muslim Student Association, who threw rocks through dorm buildings, who pitched encampments in the middle of the quad and disrupted lectures. I can't point to a single one. Unfortunately, I could point to almost every single anti-Israel group on a college campus. The second point, as it pertains to Harvard University, is there was a study done by the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expressions 4 years ago, FIRE. And FIRE ranked 248 American universities as to how well they committed themselves to free speech and the First Amendment. Out of 248 American universities, Harvard was ranked 248th. They were ranked dead last. This is an institution that when you enroll as a freshman, you have mandatory training where you are told that fat phobia, that sizeism, and that ableism are grounds for discipline. You are told that words are violent, and in fact, the former president of Harvard University, Claudine Gay, was instrumental in demoting an African-American professor for coming out against Black Lives Matter. They fired another professor from fulfilling his legal obligations and representing an objectionable client. They disinvited a controversial speaker who was deemed transphobic. They unenrolled 12 admitted students who had posted a sexist meme on a private WhatsApp group, which is really remarkable because Harvard has zero track record or history of protecting or even trying to pretend to promote free speech. The only time they suddenly had an interest was when Claudine Gay randomly said that she wished she could protect American Jewish students, but she has this newfound commitment to free speech in the First Amendment, which is objectively not true when you look at the history of Harvard University. Having said that, though, and I want to be absolutely clear because I get attacked for things that I have not said, you have a right to say things that are hateful. There is no legal distinction between free speech and hate speech. Hate speech is absolutely free speech, and students should be allowed to call for an intifada. Students should be allowed to call for the freeing of Palestine from the river. They should be allowed to do those things. The problem is the double standard. So Harvard University will tell students from day one, there are certain things you can't say. So you cannot engage in sizeism, whatever that is. You cannot engage in ableism. You cannot engage in fat phobia. But the only exception they make is anti-Semitism. So all we are asking for is a standard that is applied equally. If you want to say that all speech is fine, then great. I would be in favor of that. Students should be allowed to call for an intifada. But if you want to make the distinction that we will unenroll you if you are a sexist, but we will promote you if you are an anti-Semite, what we are calling out is not the speech. What we are calling out is the hypocrisy. You have a right in America to hate Jews. I don't recommend it, but you can do it. You should be able to exercise that right. And this goes into a broader theological problem that I think our country is facing, which is if young people in particular, which Coach, you brought this up, if they truly believe that I will never get ahead in life, I will never have a successful relationship, I will never get a good paying job or find a wife because something the Jews, then they will tap out of society. They will give up their role in building a better life for themselves and for their community. That's why I care so much about anti-Semitism. Not because it's mean words to me. I mean, I don't like the death threats, but it's more so because I recognize that this is fundamentally a cancer for Gen Z and Gen Z men in particular. If they truly believe that there is a cabal of Jews who control their lives, then it is no wonder they have higher rates of depression, higher rates of anxiety, and engage, whether it's in the far left or in the far right, in actual violence. That's why it is so problematic. It's not merely a Jewish problem. It is a profoundly and uniquely American problem as well.
Let me go to some more questions. I'm going to try to, we started late. I'm going to try to keep us on time, but we have more questions. But go ahead, please, Yitzi. We'll just shorten our answers a little bit.
Really quickly, I'm not a judicial scholar. The only way I'll ever make a bench is if Coach Pearl puts me on the team. But when deciding between my free rights to cross campus and their free rights to call for intifada and block me, UCLA turned off the sprinklers.
Let's go to Rabbi. Did you still have your light on? And then I'm going to come to you, Dr. Phil, and then Dr. Carson.
First, I want to express my gratitude to all the witnesses, and I want to thank the chair for his leadership. As we prepare to do our duty, which is to advise the president and the administration, it struck me, especially as Roy Berman was speaking, that part and parcel of addressing the endangerment of religious liberty in America, when it comes to Jews in America or when it comes to all sorts of faith communities in America, part and parcel of that is addressing education in America. And while an essential aspect of the way the administration has to address this is focusing on what happens and what are the penalties that are applied to a university when the civil rights of any group within the student body is violated. We also have to think, as Ray Berman said, and this is really at the heart of all of your testimony, how do we nurture a teaching and a love of the heritage of the West in general and of the United States in particular, and thereby help foster the future leadership of this country. And so it seems to me, you do see this at the state level. States are thinking about this. How are we educating, and how are state universities educating when it comes to American history? And again, within the limits of the First Amendment, as Ryan described, how can the government support civic education at the highest level? Love of America, celebration of America. I know that President Trump's chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities has done wonderful work on this. And it seems to me, and it's just struck me for the first time sitting here, that recommendations in that regard, the positive along with the punitive, might be part and parcel of the recommendations that we make as to how to foster the future of religious freedom in America. And I'd love for reflections from any of you. Thank you.
Any reflections? If they are, short, but go ahead, Rabbi.
I couldn't agree more, and this is essential for the future of our country. If we don't think about what's positive and how to gather universities who are doing it right, we are missing this opportunity because students are looking for it. And I just want to say, and it touches on Ryan's point, and also Rabbi Soloveitchik, in terms of the rights, it's not just about the rights, it's also about the purpose. And I tell presidents of universities all the time, there is no conflict between institutional neutrality and moral clarity. It is okay for a president to be able to say, I am institutionally neutral, but raping women and beheading children is morally wrong. And if they're not willing to say that, what does that tell you about the education that they're giving over to the students, to the purpose of their education? And that's why to rally the universities that see as part of their responsibility is civic and moral ethics as part of what they're doing, which is so essential in the formative times of their lives, right? That is who we need to promote and to support. And the government playing a role in that is essential today to move this story forward.
Dr. Phil, and then Reverend, I'll come to you next, then Carrie, and then Dr. Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure, given our schedule, that I have adequate time to say what I want to say here.
Take all the time you need.
You know, we're preparing a report for the President of the United States about religious liberty, and I think you have to follow the money. If we want to do this as an academic exercise, then, you know, we can talk about it till the cows come home. If we want to actually make a difference, then it's probably going to come down to funding. You know, I'm not Jewish, but I've really invested in this cause, and what these gentlemen are saying is not being hypersensitive. It's true. I've seen it. I was on UCLA campus the day and night they took that encampment down. I was with Jewish students on that campus that day as they stood and looked at these activists, these demonstrators, saying, "We want you dead." It's just that simple. We want you dead. This is not a private university. This is a public. We pay for this university. Our tax dollars. I understand free speech. I understand they can say, I suppose, that we want you dead, but they can't push them around physically. They can't impede their ability to get into the library. They can't intimidate them to the point that they don't feel safe going to class. And I saw all of those things happen. I heard their lives threatened. I actually stood with them in the Halil as they called campus police for assistance, and as soon as they said what they wanted, they heard a dial tone. They just hung up. But I mean, they didn't say, "Hey, can't help you, call." They just hung up. If you look at the ratio of left liberal to conservatives on college campuses at the administrative level, it's 25-1. It's 25-1. If you look at it at the professional level, you know, it's anywhere from 60% to 11 to 26% conservative. And At Harvard, it's 80%, for example, who, by the way, have had $385 million from foreign countries in the last 5 or 6 years. And listen, if you listen long enough, people will tell you what they believe. You know, we heard from the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and UPenn testifying on Capitol Hill with sickening smugness, condescension, arrogance, and dismissiveness when asked the simple question, does calling for genocide of Jews violate your policy against bullying and harassment? To really understand the gravity of that question, you just have to take out the word genocide and just put in a dictionary definition of genocide, which is the deliberate killing of a large number of Jews with the aim of destroying the Jewish ethnic group and the nation of Israel. Does that violate your policy against bullying and harassment? Well, the answer was it depends on context. It depends on context if calling for the deliberate killing of a large number of Jews with the aim of destroying the Jewish ethnic group and the nation of Israel, does that violate your policy for bullying and harassment? Well, I'll give you some context. While you were intellectually selling out, I was in Israel talking to hostage families, visiting the kibbutz, going to the site of the Nova concert, interviewing the prime minister, looking at the damage that was done, viewing footage that others haven't seen. This is all real. This is all real. If we want to make an actual change here, we need to be prepared to make a recommendation that they may have the right to this speech, but we have the right to not pay them to do it. We have the right to not use public funds to pay people to single out a group and intimidate and harass them and call for their murder. We have intellectual rot at our elite universities in the absence of critical thinking. And if we're willing to sit by and allow Jews to be singled out and continue to pay for that infrastructure, that ideology, and we have impressionable kids going for an education instead getting indoctrination from these ideologues, then we get what we ask for, and you deserve better. And as a commission, we need to be very clear about that, and the leverage we have, I suppose, is funding of these universities. Harvard has $56.9 billion endowment, so maybe they don't feel like they need the money, but that's a bluff I would call. That and a whole lot of other universities that are replacing critical thinking and education with intellectual rot and indoctrination. And I think we need to be very bold about that. When we have administrators endorsing students demonstrating for known terrorist groups, which, by the way, have killed 48 Americans, it seems to me we need to take a strong stand and be very bold in our report about this. And thank all of you for having the courage to be here. You live it every day. I talk about it a lot, and I just know the death threats I get are insignificant to what I'm sure you must endure. Thank you for your courage in speaking out here today. Thank every one of you.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. And members, since we did start late and powerful testimony, great questions, we have more witnesses, we're going to extend our time. We're going to end at 1. We'll go to 1:30 or 1:40. So if anyone has a flight they need to change, you can change that. Or if you had to leave at 1, I sure respect that. Reverend Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got just a simple question. Where in the last 20 years has anti-Semitism come from? Who's behind it?
It may go unanswered.
I think the general hatred for Western culture and religious values is where it comes from. It's all in bed together. I spoke at a Christian high school on Friday. Shout out to Mount Academy. And they had me, an Orthodox religious Jew, speaking to them, and I said, you need to stand for your religious values and the Western values. And when we let that slide, when we let communists take over the country through Qatar and Iranian funding, this is the result.
I would agree with that. I would add just two things quickly. One is it comes from the absence of something else. So anti-Semitism or the hatred of the Jew, to me, is indicative of a much greater societal ill, which is people looking for meaning or purpose or answers in their lives. And because they have abdicated religious institutions, then anti-Semitism is sort of seen as a scapegoat or rationale for why their lives have not ended up the way they wanted it to be. That's sort of my thinking on this. But as it pertains to college campuses specifically, the best example I can come up with is Luigi Mangione. So Luigi Mangione, of course, shot and killed Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO, in broad daylight in Manhattan. Every single age demographic in the United States condemned that assassination because it was, in fact, an assassination, with one glaring exception. That's 18 to 24-year-olds. 18 to 24-year-olds, my generation, overwhelmingly support what Luigi Mangione did because we on our college campuses have been fed a diet of political indoctrination whereby all peoples can be classified into two groups, the oppressors or the oppressed. And if you are on, or if you score high enough on the victimhood Olympics, if you are oppressed enough, then you have carte blanche freedom to do whatever it is you need to rid yourself of that oppression, which is why you can show my classmates at Harvard the most horrific images and videos of October 7th. And in fact, we were the first university in the world to show the October 7th footage. And ironically enough, Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard University, refused to go because she was busy preparing for her congressional testimony the next day, which went swimmingly. And you can show my classmates those images. It will not move them in any measurable way because as they will tell you, as they told me, resistance is justified when people are occupied. So whether they raped or killed or beheaded, it doesn't really matter because that's what they had to do, and they had a permission structure to do that thing. That's how I view anti-Semitism, is the moral abdication or perhaps the permission structure to blame others for your lack of personal fulfillment in life.
Dr. Phil, I see you want to make a follow-up. Reverend Franklin, were you finished? Did you want to make a follow-up, Reverend Franklin?
In the last 25 years, there has been a seed of anti-Semitism that has taken root. And my question is, who's behind that? Maybe the coach knows.
I just want to go on record that I'm answering Reverend Graham. If there's a question about faith or religion, this is really, is it?
We all feel the same way, Coach, so you're just fine.
Reverend, I know you've been to Jerusalem many, many times. And some people are afraid to go there for whatever reason. I just think it brings us all together. I'm just amazed by seeing all the faiths there at the same time, free to worship. And Reverend, I think that faith can be a choice in this sense. Religion has divided us in many ways instead of uniting us. And I think that's part of the foundational problem with anti-Semitism. I just choose to look at our faith and our Father God the same way you do.
Dr. Phil, do you have a follow-up? Then I'll come to you, Kerry.
I just wanted to share, last week I had the honor to sit and interview the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Leiter, and I asked him that very question. I said, where does this come from? I think of late it is the oppressed oppressor sort of dichotomy, and he said he is, by the way, his son, a medical student, was killed in this conflict, and wonderful young man. But he said after much study that he does believe that there is this conspiracy theory that is bandied about that the Jews are in control of all the financial markets. They're in control of everything that's going on that dominates economy and society, and that they're manipulating that, and it gives people someone to blame, someone that they can push off their woes onto. And he also said that he really believes that it is fear of the unknown, that there's a difference, that the Jews have different practices, that they sometimes look different. And it's that fear of the unknown and difference that it's easy to hate what you don't understand. And that those two things that he believes has driven this for centuries, and he still sees it and hears it today in Israel and around the world. He said you even see it in the United Nations in talking with people. So he thinks that it is this conspiracy that Jews control the world economic markets and that they fear what they don't understand.
Carrie?
Thank you. Mr. Frankel, this is for you. You described very painful experiences at UCLA, and I take that very serious. At the same time, many of the students who I've spoken to personally who created those encampments say that they were protesting the killing of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza and their university's financial ties to that war. So I need to ask you, in a country built on religious liberty and the First Amendment, do you believe someone can stand firmly against anti-Semitism, including what you experienced, and at the same time condemn the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza, or reject political Zionism, or not support the political state of Israel? Or do you believe that speaking out about what many Americans view as genocide in Gaza should be treated as anti-Semitic? Because in my view, the United States cannot and must not make loyalty to a particular theology about Israel a litmus test for protected speech or moral legitimacy.
Charlie Kirk said that Jew hate is brain rot. Some people don't have brains. I'm not going to assist them in setting a double standard for the Israeli government and the Jewish people as they fight to defend themselves. These were students calling for intifada within days after October 7th, before Israel had even entered Gaza. So it's not about them and their using Palestinian civilian death, which is horrendous and horrible. They're using it as a prop, and it doesn't matter. My religious beliefs are violated. You don't get to block me because I'm Zionist and a Jew. You want to protest Israel? Great, 100% go ahead and do it. But the university let them wear masks, even though there's a mask ban. They violated all time, place, and manner restrictions, amplified sounds. It went on for years. They kept doing this time after time again. And that's what the judge saw and said, that's not okay. They can protest, they can't block Jews, and you can't assist them in doing it.
I'm really grateful that we're having this discussion because I think this is a topic that is really affecting so many Americans. Rabbi Shapiro, he's based in New York. I invited him here today, but he's not here today. He says, and I would love your opinion on this, American Jews are increasingly treated as less fully American, our loyalty questioned, our belonging made conditional, because Zionist ideology falsely claims Israel is the nation state of Jews everywhere, and that every Jew is nationally tied to it. He says, this framing is anti-Semitic at its core. It strips us of our identity as Americans, recasts us as foreigners in our own country, and arms anti-Semites with accusations of divided loyalties and collective guilt for actions we neither chose nor control. No other foreign country does this. No sovereign state claims to politically represent an entire worldwide group defined by religion or heritage and bind its members to its deeds. Yet Jews alone bear this unique, unjust burden. That dangerous lie must be rejected openly and firmly. The remedy is clear: civic education that teaches unconditional American belonging through citizenship alone, not ethnicity, heritage, or any fabricated foreign tie. We are Americans, full stop, and we reject any doctrine that treats us otherwise. Would you say that statement is anti-Semitic?
What I'll say is that Natan Sharansky says there's three things that you shouldn't do with Israel. You shouldn't delegitimize it, you shouldn't demonize it, and you shouldn't apply a double standard. If you can abide by those three things, you're not anti-Semitic.
So by not being a Zionist, does that make you an anti-Semite?
I don't think you need to be a Zionist to support a country that defends itself and is free and religious in a hostile neighborhood.
So is anti-Zionism
Hold on
anti-Semitism?
one second, Carrie.
Yes.
It is? It is?
Sorry.
Yes.
To take that point for a second.
Let me back up. I didn't want to step over that answer. I didn't know you were still, both of you, still talking, so.
Just to be clear, is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism?
Yes.
It is? Under IHRA?
Rabbi,
sure.
you're up next.
You're not
That
sure?
definition,
So
but
what is the
I
definition?
would love to speak to that. Undoubtedly, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and undoubtedly, and one does not have to support the specific policies of the government of Israel, but to not support the right of Israel to exist, which is what anti-Zionists do, while not taking that same stand to the 28 Muslim countries and 13 Christian countries in this world, is a double standard, is hypocrisy, and is absolutely anti-Semitism.
I think it's also important that we not make Islamophobic remarks while we're here today. I would appreciate that.
I just want to
Since this
say,
is a religious liberty hearing.
God forbid was anything like that said. But if the Jewish people are the only people that you deny the right to have its own state, that is absolutely a double standard, hypocrisy, and anti-Semitism.
Well, as you know, I'm a Catholic, and Catholics do not embrace Zionism, just so you know. So are all Catholics anti-Semites, according to you?
As I said, anti-Zionism, by denying the right of the Jews to have their own state while not saying the same for any other peoples, that is a double standard, hypocrisy, and anti-Semitism.
So just to be clear, are Catholics anti-Semites?
Carrie, excuse me. I'm going to interrupt the discussion. Our committee is focused on religious liberty taken from all people, whether they be Muslims, Jews, Christians, Sikhs. We've had all those witnesses here. This is not a commission on defining religions or calling out any theology, or this is not the commission for that.
Right, but we're
so
talking
you
about
were-
a foreign nation, so I want to be clear on what the definition of anti-Semitism is. If I don't support the political state of Israel, am I an anti-Semite? Yes or no?
They already answered, asked and
Yes.
answered.
According to you, on the record, yes? If I don't support the political state of Israel?
I don't personally label people, but what I'm saying is, if somebody states if somebody says they're an anti-Zionist, they are saying about themselves that they have a double standard and hypocrisy, and they're taking anti-Semitic positions.
Okay. Carrie, you feel like you have your questions in?
I don't agree with that because as a Catholic, I don't agree that the new modern state of Israel has any biblical prophecy meaning at all. So that's my stance, and I'm Catholic.
Catholics support the Muslims.
Yeah. Dr. Ben.
First of all, I want to thank you all for your passionate stance and bringing some clarity to this issue. I've known a lot of Jewish people, worked with a lot of Jewish people. Some of the finest people that I know sitting in the front row here, Dr. Henry Brim, 25 years, the chairman of neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins, is one of the kindest, fairest people I've ever worked with. And, I wonder why, do people really think that Jews are a separate entity in the United States of America? Jews have been here since the very beginning. They, too, were interested in a place where they could practice their religion freely. When George Washington's army was about out of cash, it was Ham Salomon, a Jew, very rich Jew, who gave up virtually all of his money and encouraged other people to give, which saved the Union. I don't know that we would have ever become a country without the input of Jews. So that's something we need to remember. We need to remember that during the Civil Rights Movement, who was standing right there with the rest of us who were interested in freedom for everybody in our society? It was the Jews. Many of them died for the cause of civil rights. And I just want to make that point, that they are not a separate entity from Americans. They're a very important part. And how do we get people to recognize that and not think of Jews as something separate? And by the way, as a Yalie, I should be happy to hear all this about Harvard.
Okay, any other members have any other questions? Allison.
First of all, thank you to all of you, not just for being here today, but for your courage in standing up. Because we know that when attacks come, it's not just against the person. You're being attacked to send a message to others. And so thank you so much for your courage in standing up. Before I went to law school, I had the great privilege of teaching at a Christian liberal arts college. And I remember having a discussion with a former colleague in graduate school. He said, well, don't you feel restricted? Don't you feel limited? And I said, I have more freedom as an intellectual, as an academic at my Christian liberal arts school than I would have on any other campus, certainly not on an elite campus. And I just want to underscore what Dr. Phil said. When the college presidents were asked, they weren't asked, does this view violate the First Amendment? They were asked, does this violate your rules, your own rules on bullying? And couldn't answer that question. It is the hypocrisy. It is the hypocrisy to wave around the free speech banner for this when most college and university campuses, if anything, have been free speech zones. So I think as the commission, as we gather to try to focus on religious liberty, on increasing religious liberty and ways that we can suggest and recommend to the president to increase it, I think it is vitally important to acknowledge that for years, college campuses around the country have been the furthest thing from places where free speech has been allowed to flourish. So we should be horrified, but we should not be surprised at what we see happening on particularly elite college campuses across the country. But thank you again for being here. We're very grateful for your testimony and your presence and your courage.
Carrie, do you have a follow-up? Your light was on.
Yeah, I just want to confirm, because you didn't really answer my question about the rabbi. Were his statements anti-Semitic?
If he's applying a double standard, then yes.
Can I answer the question?
Yeah, please, thank you.
Are you referring to Rabbi Shapiro of the Empty Wagon?
Yaakov Shapiro.
Yeah, so he's an incredibly discredited rabbi. I think he lives in Lakewood. He wrote this book called The Empty Wagon, where he deliberately mistranslated works from rabbinic sages like Elchanan Wasserman, for example. That's why he doesn't have a community of his own, his own synagogue, because I encourage everyone, learn Hebrew. He deliberately mistranslates the text. Whether it's anti-Semitic or not, I mean, who really cares? That's kind of the point we were discussing earlier. You can hate Jews or not hate Jews. I don't really mind. What I do mind is when people violate the law, and that's why this commission is so important. So hate Jews, think they control the banks, think they have horns, I mean, go for it. I don't mean you, but one can go for it. But what matters is when they're violating the law, and that's what the purpose of this commission is. Whether they're violating the law against Jewish students or Muslim students or Christian students, that is when it becomes a federal issue. So as it pertains to foreign countries, look, in Saudi Arabia, it is literally illegal to practice Christianity, but interestingly, that was not asked. So if we want to apply the same standard against all foreign countries, then absolutely. Any country that discriminates against people based on their religion should probably not be considered an American ally. But I find the fixation on Israel exclusively, when that is the only country in the Middle East that guarantees free access to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. I encourage all of you, next time you're in Israel, go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Go where Jesus was baptized. Go to Capernaum. Go to Nazareth. Go to the Galilee. Those are really good places to go to. And thankfully, it is under democratic control. I unfortunately can't say the same thing about Jewish sites that are under Muslim control in the Middle East. So, for example, As a Jew, I'm literally not allowed to enter the Jewish holy sites that are controlled by predominantly Muslim countries in the Middle East, which is a big problem, and I'm happy to discuss that more. But I would imagine for the relevancy of this commission, we care about American students, we care about American citizens, and any American citizen who's being attacked, Jew, Christian, Muslim, that should be an issue of concern for this commission and for President Trump.
Thank you. Yeah, just a follow-up. One last follow-up. Since we've mentioned Israel a total of 17 times, are you willing to condemn what Israel has done in Gaza?
No, because I unilaterally reject that. It's not a genocide. The only genocide ever carried out was on October 7th when Hamas tried killing every man, woman, and child they could possibly find. Hang on, let me respond.
70,000 innocent civilians killed?
Let me respond. So first of all,
you won't condemn that?
And Carrie,
just on the record.
He's already. Excuse me. Okay. As chair of the committee.
I think it's important we have this discussion.
I agree. I'm happy to answer.
And Carrie,
I think we'd be great friends.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer.
Carrie, we have had the discussion. Good questions, good answers. This is a commission on religious liberty. If there's another commission on this issue,
I don't know why we're talking about a foreign country 17
to be fair, you brought it up.
Okay.
You did.
At no point in my testimony did I mention Israel. I was very clear about American Jewry.
You did.
I did not mention Israel.
Okay. We'll talk about this later.
But that's objectively not true. I did not mention Israel.
This can be another discussion on another day, and you two can have coffee. Let's go to Rabbi to close this up, and then we will wrap this panel up.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought I'd conclude this session with just two comments. The first is just building off the double standard to which our witnesses referred. I'm in a unique situation because I sit on two separate religious liberty commissions. I'm on the President's Domestic Liberty Commission, and I'm also a member of the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom. And of course, everything I'm saying now is not representing any of my fellow commissioners on either commission. It's just me. But what's so striking to me, especially as the past year and the bid has gone on, is that if you're on the USCIF, U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom, you are constantly seeing reports of genuine persecution and massacres around the world of religious groups. And you see, by and large, in the world, and certainly in the University Quad, total silence. You see what's been described by the State Department as a genuine genocide by China of the Muslim Uyghurs, and not a single mention, in contrast to libellous descriptions of a situation in Gaza where, as described by the World Health Organization today or yesterday, the number of child vaccinations in Gaza and the number, therefore, of children in Gaza has actually gone up since October 7th, 2023, thereby reflecting how terms such as genocide applied to that conflict is utilized to describe what has occurred in Gaza is either ignorant or pernicious, and often both. My second comment is that one of the great privileges I've had is to travel around this country and to speak to different religious communities and religious institutions. Before October 7th and after October 7th, I've spoken at Catholic universities, I've spoken at Latter-day Saint universities, I've spoken to evangelical Christians in gatherings in Dallas and Little Rock in North Carolina. This is an incredibly diverse country. And the one thing we should be careful about is speaking on behalf of all members of a religious community, even if one is a member of that religious community. I certainly wouldn't claim to speak for all Jews on all subjects. We're not known for agreeing on everything. And that certainly should be said for speaking about Catholics in America, by whose friendship I've been blessed. And so I thought maybe I'll just close our session by just citing the words of our incredible Secretary of State, who also happens to be a very devout Catholic, Marco Rubio, who said the following. He was speaking in Israel, but he was reflecting on the larger state of the Jewish people and the persecution it suffered throughout the centuries. Marco Rubio said, standing in what is called the Pilgrimage Road near the Temple Mount, and he said as follows: "To stand here today on the very road where not 2,000 years ago so many from everywhere venture to fulfill that desire to be closer to the Creator, is a humbling and honoring experience. As you go through the layers of history, this is Secretary Rubio, you realize that all the civilizations that conquered this city, all the ones who tore it down and built on top, are all gone. The Roman Empire is no more, nor any of the others that sought to conquer and rule this land. But one people remain. They have returned. For God's promise is eternal and it is perfect, and His word is always true. That's the Secretary. Thanks very much.
Members, we've had a little different question and answering here, but I think it's been healthy. You wanted to bring up several points, Carrie. I hope you feel you've had that opportunity. And other members, I want to thank the witnesses. One closing comment here about education. So Texas, because of President Trump, helped us get the largest school choice program across the line last year for 100,000 students, $1 billion. In the first 3 days, over 60,000 families signed up. And most of the schools that they are going to are different schools of faith. So I believe there is this hunger, not just by, I lose track of the generation, is it Z, X, Y, but of the latest generation. What am I on, Shabbos? I mean, you messed up Christmas, so I can mess up my alphabet here.
We're Gen Z. I think
Gen
you guys
Z.
are boomers, no offense.
All right. Yeah.
But you all look very young.
Yeah, Dr. Phil, we didn't have letters for us, did we? We're just getting older. But I do think there's that hunger. I see it everywhere, that young people are looking for relevance, and obviously for the parents, because we're going to surpass our 100,000 applicants for private schools pretty quickly in probably just a few weeks. And I think that's a very positive sign, I want to thank all the witnesses, all the commission members. Thank you for all of your questions. And now we'll go on to the next panel. Thank you very much.
We're going to be moving on with a second panel in just a couple of minutes, so please make yourselves comfortable. We've lost the left half of our... Well, because we have a time issue and all the panelists are here, and half the panelists are here on this side, we're going... Okay. You represent that side, okay. That's the left side, by the way. We have with us today for this panel about anti-Semitism in our communities where we live and work. Liat Cohen Reese, it's pretty good, and Pastor J.C. Cooper, Dr. Moshe Glick, and Jonathan Gross. We are delighted that you all are with us. We know you have some dynamic testimony, and we'll start with Ms. Reese.
Members of the Commission, thank you for this opportunity. I am the founder and director of the Christian and Jewish Alliance in San Diego, California. Last year, I became the director of the Anti-Semitism Task Force at Stand With Us, an international organization devoted to combating anti-Semitism and misinformation on Israel through education and outreach. I'm here to share about the hostility we have faced from anti-Semitic agitators who continuously disrupt our worship services. With the help of First Liberty Institute, we have filed a lawsuit seeking federal protection so that we can worship in peace. As a devout Jew, I believe that Hashem, God, created an everlasting covenant with Abraham described in the Torah. My religious beliefs call on me to support and pray for Israel as a safe homeland for the Jewish people. The term commonly used by Jews worldwide to describe our connection to the Jewish ancestral homeland of Israel, an integral part of my religious, ethnic, and cultural identity, is Zionism. The massacre on October 7th of 2023 in Israel was the largest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. During that time, many of us in the San Diego Jewish community felt isolated. Yet I refused to believe that we were actually alone. I reached out to local Christian leaders, including the Mission Church, and we formed the Christian and Jewish Alliance based on our shared religious beliefs about Israel. At first, we regularly hosted events bringing Christians and Jews together, from intimate Shabbat dinners at local churches to large worship events. But hostile agitators have consistently targeted our public events, attacking us every time we've come together. Our first event was an outdoor worship service in October of 2024 at a Jewish community center. A group of individuals tried to drown out our message with sirens and bullhorns. Because we were in a gated area within a large field, they had to stay at a distance. But the agitators, along with Code Pink San Diego, posted on social media saying, "We need to disturb their peace." Little did we know how these harassers would make their threats a terrifying reality in the year ahead. Their campaign of disruption and harassment at our worship services in 2025 has made me feel even more alone than when I founded the Alliance. One of the ultimate goals of anti-Semitism is isolating Jews by attacking anyone who dares to support them. That's why Christians who support us have experienced anti-Semitism too. Pastor J.C. Cooper will share about that next.
Thank you very much. Check.
Push your.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, members of the Commission. And it is such a joy to be here today for this opportunity to share with each of you the truth of what is happening on the West Coast between Jews and Christians as we seek to unite under the banner of religious freedom. I serve as the assistant pastor at the Mission Church alongside our lead pastor, David Menard, in the beautiful beach city of Carlsbad, California. But I also not only speak to you as a pastor, but also as a husband and as a father to 4 children, in which both my wife and children have been subject to hate and discrimination in our own house of worship. After the October 7th massacre, our church answered the biblical conviction to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Jewish people in their time of need. We are deeply honored and blessed to partner with Liat and the Christian Jewish Alliance. Our interfaith worship service on March 19th was a part of this mission. Inside our sanctuary, we prayed, we worshiped, and we listened to an educational talk from Dr. Einat Wilf, who is an Israeli citizen, a former member of the Israeli Knesset, and an expert on the current conflict in Israel. The sanctuary was packed with more than 450 people. Jews and Christians linked arms and held hands during worship and song. It was a beautiful testimony of unity, the very unity that our nation needs today. But the atmosphere completely changed when a hostile agitator stood up inside the sanctuary and began screaming hateful language about Jews and accusing both Jews and Christians of genocide. That first agitator resisted members of our church-led safety team to escort him out. But soon after, Dr. Wilf began speaking again. A second agitator began screaming and resisting removal, stalling the service yet again and frightening worshipers. This systematically occurred 7 different times from agitators who pretended to be guests, strategically placed themselves in our sanctuary, and timed their hostile rants to be as disruptive as possible. Each new agitator shouted in hate, and the terror and distraction became palpable in a room full of Christians and Jewish adults and children, including my own. One agitator screamed to free Palestine from the river to the sea, calling for the elimination of the Jewish homeland inside our church. They screamed epithets at and in front of my children, including F you, over and over again. When we began to guide this particular agitator out of the sanctuary, she forcefully resisted, slammed her body into me and others, and we almost fell down our balcony stairs. While the tension grew inside our sanctuary, a mob was amassing outside of our front entrance doors. They screamed through bullhorns, blaring sirens, right outside the church, shouting chants like, "Mission Church, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide." They falsely accused our members and our Jewish guests of being Nazis. You imagine calling Jewish people Nazis? My peaceable invitation to speak with these agitators was met with violent rhetoric and hostile body language. One man even charged the entrance of our front doors. Our worship service and our opportunity to learn about anti-Semitism was shattered through the hostile anger and hate of these agitators. Instead, we experienced anti-Semitism firsthand. Our congregation, our Jewish guests, my wife, my children, and I literally feared for our safety as the agitators dominated the narrow sidewalk out in front of our church doors. They blocked the exit with their bodies, signs, flags, carts, and blaring bullhorns. The mob completely blocked our path from exiting the church, and as several hundred worshipers attempted to leave, we were literally cornered shielding women and children. Although we had coordinated with the police as a proactive measure, they were hesitant to help because the disruptors were on a public sidewalk and they were afraid to show favoritism to one group over the other. When violence became inevitable, the police, alongside of our church-led safety team, finally cleared a narrow path. Nevertheless, the mob screamed anti-Semitic slurs and hateful rhetoric. Terrified families begged me to be personally escorted to their vehicles due to safety reasons. I have never experienced anything like that mob. Nobody should have to pay that kind of price to worship in their own church or synagogue and to learn about how to stand with our Jewish community against anti-Semitism. But to our shock and horror, these same agitators returned on Easter Sunday to our church, the holiest day of the Christian calendar, to harass members and guests and children.